So good morning, good afternoon, good evening, wherever you are, different parts of the world. It's really exciting to have with us three very, very distinguished people from Canada, actually, and they are, some of you might know the work that McMaster has led over the years since the 60s and 70s on project-based learning, which only nowadays the rest of the world is catching up on. So we have three speakers: Professor Greg Moran, who is the Executive Director of Academics Without Borders. He became Executive Director of Academics Without Borders in 2017. He was involved in teaching and research in development psychology at Western University in Canada for almost 40 years, where he also served as Dean of Graduate Studies and Provost and Vice President Academics. From 2011 to 2015, Greg was the Provost at Aga Khan University, overseeing academic programs at campuses in Karachi, Nairobi, Dar es Salaam, Kampala, and London. Our second speaker is Professor Tom Martin, again, Academics Without Borders, volunteer and program lead for strengthening engineering research. Dr. Tom Martin is a Professor Emeritus of Chemical Engineering at McMaster University in Hamilton, Ontario, in Canada. Prior to joining McMaster as an industrial research chair, he has worked in industry for 15 years. Our third distinguished speaker today is Professor David S. Wilkinson, again, an Academics Without Borders volunteer and a core team member. David Wilkinson holds the title of Distinguished University Professor at McMaster University. He was actually formerly Dean of Engineering and Provost at McMaster University. So it's such a pleasure to have you guys join us, and thank you, all of you. And we will, I guess, get started with Professor Greg Moran, and he can, you can join, you can share the screen anytime you want.
Thank you very much. I'm going to try and share my screen and go through the awkward process of making sure I get the right screen up to sharing. So just give me a moment to do that. And I think you'll probably see my schedule to begin with, but you'll.
Yeah, we can see a screen. We can see it. Yeah.
Good. So soon after that, we should get the right screen up.
Yep.
Okay. So you're now getting the what looks like the right scene. Perfect. Anyway, thank you, Krishna, and thank you to the organization for hosting us, allowing us this time to talk to you this morning. What we're going to do in the presentation this morning, and it's a pleasure to speak to such a relevant audience with membership from so many parts of the world, is that I will begin the conversation with a brief description of Academics Without Borders, sort of an overview, take me about 10 minutes or so, and then we'll see if any questions have arisen during that presentation. Following that, the bulk of the presentation will be focused on a program that we're extremely excited about, and that Tom Marlin and David Wilkinson are so integral to, and they will be making a presentation on our Strengthening Engineering Research program. And that'll probably take around 25 minutes, and we'll leave some time for questions, comments, and discussion, hopefully stick to about an hour-long period of time. Academics Without Borders is a very focused organization in the sense that we try to make sure that we target a single objective, which is to collaborate with, in partnership with universities in low and middle income countries, to help increase their capacity and improve the quality of their programs. We do this for reasons that I think are obvious to all of you who are listening to the presentation. We do it because we believe that quality higher education is critical to any society, no matter where it is. It plays an important part in creating healthy societies that feature shared wealth and are stable. It's important that universities' post-secondary education also be available locally. There's a lot of, as we know in Canada, there's a lot of international students here, a lot of offshore education that happens in the global north with students coming from the global south. But clearly that can't meet the tremendous demand that's there. And so our focus is to try to help our partners around the world to build the kinds of programs where they can respond to the demand for quality education in their own communities. And we do that also because obviously all of that, a post-secondary education changes lives. It changes lives of individuals, but it also changes lives of communities and helps build communities. So that's our singular focus within Academics Without Borders. This focus is often to some extent neglected by the broader aid community, by multinational and binational organizations, aid organizations who largely sometimes focus more on primary education and health. For good reason. There are all kinds of urgent demands that demand a kind of response right away. This also includes responses to both natural and human-generated tragedies and disruptions, such as climate change and internal strife. And so a lot of the focus of international aid agencies and governments is to respond to those needs. The difficulty with that is often many of those problems recur without the kinds of teachers, healthcare workers, and other leaders that are generated by quality university programs. In this case, engineers that contribute in so many ways to establishing the kinds of societies we're talking about. We try at Academics Without Borders to fill that gap in a modest, but we think very significant way. Academics Without Borders' value proposition is simple. We work on the basis of volunteers who receive no remuneration, but who are highly qualified, highly experienced. David and Tom are clear examples of that. You've heard their brief introduction. These are people who bring expertise and knowledge that they're eager to share with their colleagues around the world to help improve their programs and achieve the kinds of ends that I just spoke about. So they collaborate with our partner institutions and bring a kind of expert consulting resource that otherwise simply wouldn't be affordable or available then to those partners. We focus on sustainability in the sense that we don't simply go into another university in another part of the world and deliver a service, i.e. teach, but instead we focus on trying to ensure that whatever changes our programs are aimed at making, that those changes are sustained after our volunteers leave, after our projects are finished. And there are three key elements that we believe achieves that. One is that we're entirely demand driven. So our projects are a function of the needs and priorities of the institutions that we work with. They come to us, we don't go to them, and they tell us what they need help with. The projects are designed by our partner institutions. And so that what we mean by that is that we try to develop projects that work for our partners, that meet where they're at and their capability to incorporate the new knowledge or the capacity growth that we're talking about. And we always follow a train the trainer model, so that we're training, in most cases, members of faculty who will then go on to use the expertise, the knowledge, the programs that they've developed themselves to carry on with their work on site in their own institution. Because we're demand driven, our projects occur in any area of university activity. So we don't reject any kind of request. So whether it's the more obvious kinds of projects that involve starting new academic programs in any discipline, or whether it's something more broad-based, such as improving teaching and learning, or as in the case of the Strengthening Engineering Research Program, enhancing individual faculty members' capacity to do research and to publish, or whether it's something, a sort of behind-the-scenes kind of feature of a university that are so critical to their operations, such as student services, administrative operations, and improving general teaching and pedagogy. We were talking about problem-based learning that originated at McMaster University earlier. That's the kind of thing that our volunteers will work with their partners around the world. Academics Without Borders has been around for about 15 years. We started sending volunteers and doing projects in about 2009. We're a charitable organization recognized in both Canada and the United States. To date, we've done 189 projects involving 240 volunteers at 89 partner universities in 37 different countries of the world. We also have I'm thinking in French right now, a group of 32 members of universities and colleges in Canada in something we call the AWB network. And these are universities and colleges in Canada who support the work of Academics Without Borders and more broadly believe deeply and are committed to the notion that higher education has a role to play in global development. These are the countries we've worked in. As you can see at a glance, they pretty well cover most of the regions in the world where you find low and middle income countries. A lot of work in sub-Saharan Africa, but also in South Asia, Southeast Asia, and increasingly in Latin America. Our projects are cost effective, most obviously because the most valuable resource we have is the time and expertise of our consultants, and they donate that time and expertise freely. We have no bricks and mortars, as you can tell by my background. Our offices are in our homes. We were in a virtual organization long before the pandemic. Our volunteers, as I've said, are not paid, and AWB covers the travel and other costs of our projects. If they travel, increasingly, beginning with the pandemic, our projects have been virtual, many of our projects at least, and in fact, the one you'll be hearing about today, the Strengthening Engineering Research Program, has been developed and delivered entirely virtually up until this point. Our partner institutions around the world obviously provide their faculty time and any equipment that might be necessary for the program. So the role of our partner institutions in low and middle income countries is to propose the project. They determine the specifics of the project. To the extent that it's possible, they make some contribution in kind or financially to the project. So this might be as little as providing some of the meals, picking people up at the airport, providing local transport, or for universities that have more resources, it might stretch to things like accommodation. But that's something that's negotiated at the beginning of our project. They make the final selection of volunteers after they're recruited at Academics Without Borders, and they sustain project activities once the volunteers have departed. The focus here is that our university partners are the agents of change. It's their program. We're there simply to support the capacity building project. Our role then is to determine first whether the project meets an AWB, meets the criteria for our projects, to help develop the project with our partners, to recruit, prepare, and train the volunteers, and cover whatever expenses are involved, be it involving an international visit or virtual, and to do final reports and an evaluation. These are just some examples of projects that we've been involved in recent years. You can see it's just here to illustrate the range of projects, range from improving graduate supervision, developing a population health data repository, developing a quality assurance program, and improving teaching and pedagogy in an early childhood education program. I want to touch on the fact that a new innovation during the pandemic was that AWB began to work on programs, and these are slightly different from our projects, and you'll be hearing about the engineering program in a moment. And here we've identified areas of high demand, and you can see one was strengthening engineering research, employment readiness, helping universities develop programs so that their students are ready for the workforce, scholarly communications essentials, just helping new members of faculty in particular to develop better skills at applying for grants, doing research, doing literature reviews, writing up research for publication, and a program done in collaboration with Aga Khan University to help faculty teach better online and in blended learning. And so these are standing programs where we've developed a more or less standard model, which we can tweak to meet the needs of an individual institution, but that we can offer relatively quickly and hopefully improve so that as each iteration, so that they get better and we can be more effective in our programs. These are the universities within Canada that are part of the network. Those of you familiar with the Canadian university and college system will recognize that most of the major universities and colleges in Canada are represented here, but there's also a smattering of others around the country. And these are our major supporters. McMaster University is a very important one, our host institution, but we've also received over the years good support from MasterCard Foundation and a number of local Canadian foundations. And with that, I will stop my sharing and ask whether anybody has any questions or comments before we turn it over to Tom and David.
Okay, it's a good time to have some interaction. You can either raise your hand or just unmute yourself. You're small groups, so you just unmute yourself and start talking if you wish, or you can raise your hand. Either way, or put in the chat box. Put something in the chat box. Okay, while we have people thinking about all that, yeah, Greg, I had a question. I mean, that's compliment you on the scale in terms of number of universities and number of volunteers that you have been able to connect with in these few years. What is the biggest challenge that you face in terms of getting volunteers and universities engaged, and how do you go about, connecting with them?
I would say we have no problem getting volunteers. That's been one of the most inspiring aspects of my role that in the last 6 years is that people are very eager to participate, and we really are simply a bridge or a platform that allows people to get involved. So strangely, no matter how focused the project seems to be, we seem to be able to find volunteers, and we do that through our network of universities. But we also have a mailing list of a couple thousand names of people who over the years have expressed an interest in serving as volunteers. Getting the word out to our partner universities around the world who might want to make use of our volunteers is a bit more of a challenge. And so that's why we welcome today's webinar. So hopefully there will be people either themselves or who have colleagues that they say, well, why don't you get in touch with Academics Without Borders and see if there's something you might do with them to help involve, to do capacity building for you.
Okay. Alexander, you have a hand up. Please come in.
Yes, a question, how your activity is managed, because a lot of people are involved, and who is the leaders of such activity?
Well, we have a small staff of about 5 people, including someone who oversees all of our projects. We also have a project coordinator and a number of 2 or 3 background administrative staff. Each of the projects, most of the projects, and I would qualify that with the programs like the ones David and Tom will be describing, do involve sometimes as many as 15 to 20 volunteers. And so the coordination of that kind of project is much more challenging. Most of our projects are 1 or 2 volunteers. And once they're hooked up with their partners who they're collaborating with in the low and middle income country at our partner university, then it's a relatively hands-off operation. But we do provide medical insurance, travel risk mitigation services, all of the sort of standard things that you would need to ensure that our volunteers are well cared for and protected, and don't get themselves into trouble when they're working in countries that they may not be familiar with.
Yeah. Hans, come in.
Just fascinated to listen to you, Craig. I've worked for over 25 years internationally with international NGOs that work in many of those countries. And I'm just wondering, I'm thinking of Oxfam, of CARE, of Plan International. Are there any relationships with those kind of serious historical NGOs working in many of the countries that you're describing? Again, it's a longer conversation and all that, but I just wanted to understand what connections your team, your community has with those.
We don't have any connections with the ones that you mentioned. As you know, Hans, and it's how you and I met, is that I'm always eager to reach out and talk to anyone who works with an organization that has an overlapping mission, because as you and I have discussed, you never know where that's going to lead. And all of us are stronger and have a greater impact if we can find ways that we can work together. We are a modest, we are a small organization relative to the ones you just described, and they have large resources, large staff numbers, and so it's difficult for them, I think, to figure out how they would work with us. So although I've had conversations with World University Services, WUSC, and which used to be, I forget. But I've conversations with people. We don't do anything tangible. I've had some good conversations recently with a group called Education Sub-Saharan Africa that are London-based and doing some really interesting work, and we're thinking about ways we might collaborate. But no, we don't have any strong sort of active relationships with those kinds of organizations, although it would be good to do so.
Yeah, one more question and then we'll move on. I guess, anybody have any hands up or anything question? I was wondering, Greg, how about the fundraising? Is it mostly individual donors that come in and help you out?
No, if you asked about challenges, that's obviously, as any nonprofit,
that's always, yeah.
That's always your biggest challenge.
Yeah.
And no, we do get some money from individual donations, but that it's hard to come by. I mean, individual donors in general are more likely to donate to the more well-known and more obvious organizations. Most of it comes from individual foundations or foundations,
okay.
and that's just an ongoing cycle.
Battle, solid battle. Yeah.
And the other one is that all of the members of our network of Canadian universities and colleges all pay an annual membership fee.
Ah, okay.
And that's an important part of our
so those 32 universities that you're talking about, the network of 32 universities. Oh, that's nice. That's a good, nice Canadian venture then. Good. All right. I guess I don't see any other hand. Maybe they'll come up after another presentation. So you want to move on to the next person?
Yes, please. Tom, I think, is going to
Tom,
start.
okay. You can share your screen. Please go ahead. Yep, we can see it. Yeah.
Okay. And just a note to David, my internet is going on and off. So if I freeze, David, just go right ahead and take over with your
Okay.
Having a little bit of trouble here. So thank you very much, everyone, for spending a few minutes with us here. And I join Greg in thanking you for that. So I'll be talking about the specific program or project, Strengthening Engineering Research. And I'll be sharing this with David Wilkinson at McMaster University. What we've seen is in looking at the situation, especially in sub-Saharan Africa, is that many countries are trying to vastly increase their engineering research and their production of PhDs, and to basically generate greater wealth in the countries. So there's a great demand for this in that area. I'm going to give you a quick overview here. We'll talk about the course and the project and what we mean by those two different terms, which are integrated. We'll look at some highlights from our experiences with the pluses, and of course there's some minuses, so we want you to benefit from both our good experiences and some of our challenges. And David will talk about some observations and recommendations, and talk about the future, the way we see her going in the future, and then hopefully we'll conclude with some discussions about potential collaboration so we can work together to improve both of our goals. So we started with a project called Strengthening Engineering Education and Research. There's two E's in there, SEER, we quickly realized that given the amount of time and resources that we had, that this was biting off too much. And doing undergraduate education and research in the same project was more than we could handle. And so the first lesson we learned was, be realistic about your goals. So we've reduced that to strengthening engineering research. So certainly improving technical skills of the faculty and their research skills will improve to some extent engineering, or education, but we're not addressing pedagogy directly in this program. So SEER, we kept the same pronunciation, and these are the goals here. So we're going to look at research capacity. So we want to make sure that the people who complete this program are capable of developing their own graduate students and working with colleagues to get a multiplier effect in low and middle income countries through training and mentorship. So here's what the project will look like. First, we have to select the university. And so Greg has a lot to do with that, looking for the correct universities. And David will talk a little bit later about some of the main issues in selecting a proper partner university. Then we recruit the faculty members. So again, if we have faculty members with substantial research experience, and they may become instructors in our course, but they're not the people we want to help. So we're looking at people with masters and PhDs who are full-time faculty members who have not been actively involved in research through their careers. Then we offer the training course, and I'll look a little bit more in detail about what the course involves. It's about 13 weeks, one session a week. And then there's a follow-on project. So after they've developed the program, gone through the training program, some of the projects will be selected for project execution, and that will be another 9 to 12 month period in which they will complete a short research project. So let's look at those last two in a little more detail. We have the SEER sessions, and those are taught, we've been teaching them remotely so far because of COVID and because of distance. And again, about 13 weeks of various sessions, and we'll talk a little bit about what's contained in those in a minute. In parallel, what do the participants do? Well, they basically develop their own research proposal from scratch. So they start with a letter of intent to give us an indication of the research topics. The students are working in, or the participants are working in groups of 2 or 3 faculty members, and they can bring in additional members who are not part of the course if need be to build a team with the right expertise. After the letter of intent, they're doing their literature review, and they're going through many, many more steps to look at the budget, look at the research methodology, the research questions, and so forth. So at the end, they have developed a complete research proposal that they could send to any funding agency. We have very, very limited funds with the very, very emphasized, and we select the best of these projects for continuing financial support at a very low level, and we provide the support of the mentors who will continue with them through the next 12 months to complete the research project, and our overall goal is a publication in a refereed journal. Now, of course, we have in the SEER sessions, there's various instructors. So we might have about 7 or 8 instructors giving these 13 sessions. But one of the key strengths here is that each group has its individual mentor. And these are not, they could be instructors, but they're selected from a pool of mentors that we have who can help them develop their proposals and give them some support in the technical aspects of their projects. So this overall term is a year, 3 months, something like that. Now, what does the course look like? So it's front-loaded with the key topics for developing the proposal first. So selecting a research topic, literature search, research questions, research methodology, and so forth. Those are some of the key topics that they do first, so that they're prepared to continue to work on their own individual proposals with their mentors. We have some more enrichment topics. I'm not sure ethics would be called enrichment, but community-based research, entrepreneurship, look how to search for funding and so forth. And then we have their presentations, their final reports, their graduation and so forth. What do the students do? Well, the students are developing a draft letter of intent, literature search, research questions. So there's a lot of iteration, both with the instructors, but more with the mentors, their individual group mentors on drafting these documents, preliminary documents. There's a lot of oral presentations through the middle of the course with feedback from the instructors as well as the mentors. And then finally, there's a final proposal that they prepare for us, and we evaluate and give them feedback. And we select maybe half of them for continued funding and for support by a mentor through the execution phase. So the mentors are really key here. Well, the instructors, of course, are important, but the mentors are the individuals who work with the students most closely and over a longer period of time. So during the course, they're continuing to working with the groups to give them feedback on all of their preliminary products, whether it's a literature search, which is a challenge for the people in these universities. They don't have good library facilities. They don't have a lot of experience doing literature searches, and so that's a key element in these projects, and through all the other key topics of the course. But then they follow up with the next year. So then they're doing the follow-on research execution and publication. So we assist them in developing their final publication paper as well. So we discussed many ways how to word this. The mentor's not making decisions or supervising in the term. We're not making decisions for the students. We're giving them feedback and guidance and allowing the participants at the universities to make the final decisions. So we're mentors, we're not research supervisors the way one would supervise a graduate student. They have to be able to grow and learn from their own decisions. We have done 2 projects to date in Uganda and Bara University. The course is complete, and the research execution, the extra 12 months is completed, and almost all of the final project reports are due. I have a meeting this Friday with one group who's a little bit behind, but there are good reasons for that. Several of their team members are on secondment now to finish their PhDs, and so they're trying to finish this research project while they do their PhDs, which is a tremendous challenge for the individuals. The second is Ethiopia, Bardar Institute of Technology. The course is completed, and we're well underway now in the project execution. So we're about 12 months now, or maybe it's 11 months from the final project completions. And so far, in those 2 courses, we've had 52 participants from various universities. So here's an example of one project that continued on, has been a success. low-cost, high-resolution scanning and electron microscope for malaria diagnosis. Well, the importance of malaria diagnosis goes without, doesn't have to be explained. The key issue here is it's low cost, it's portable, it's using a conventional light source, and has a high, obviously high image quality. So the key technical contribution here is a novel image reconstruction, and we've had a very bright participant from Imbara and a great mentor with good technical skills in this area, has worked at imaging for 20 or 30 years now. This is not a very good picture, but so this is the non-reconstructed versus the reconstructed image. And for people who understand malaria, they say that's a very vast improvement. It's not vaporware, so there's the real thing as a prototype. And the lead researcher is William Wasma at Imbara, and Ian Cunningham at Western University has been very involved in this and done a great job in helping William develop these ideas. So again, a very good mentor is really a tremendous plus for us. So I can't, oh, there it goes. Okay. So just to give you an idea of the kinds of projects that are going on, most of the projects are community-based. We did not push that. We allow them to choose whatever projects they're interested in. But interestingly, water, electricity, agriculture are really key issues in their research proposals. There are no sort of big science topics in this, and I think that has to do a lot with the research infrastructures at the universities, and also the time scale of the projects. We're telling them, asking them to do something that could be done in 12 months or so. So it's not surprising that there are no big science topics. A little bit surprising to me was that there are a few computationally based topics. One would think, well, if you have very little money, you can do an awful lot with a PC now. But many of them are empirical, with some computation, but with empirical to a great extent. Some other examples, wind power with bamboo blades. We have an expert in turbine and blade design. And they thought, well, let's see what we can do with local materials to reduce costs. Remote animal monitoring for which was an interesting sensor problem. Water management for small farms, and we've had several proposals on water management. And in sort of an interesting one came up with engineering education as a research topic. So we're open to their proposals. So developing professional skills prior to going to internships. At Imbara, all students do an internship, and they were getting feedback that the students weren't well enough prepared. So it was a nice project that involved both the university and a number of companies who were accepting and training the interns, and it seems to have worked out very well. So I think, David, are we flipping at this point?
Sure, that sounds good, Greg. Tom, rather. Do you want to stop sharing and I'll share my screen, or?
Sure, why don't you do that? I'm going to stop sharing.
Okay.
And if you could give David access.
Got it here. I just need, there we are. Let me know if you can see my slide.
We can see your slides. Yeah.
Okay, great.
Just got to go to full screen mode. Full screen mode. Yeah.
It's in full screen mode. Okay.
Not yet. Not yet. Not yet.
Okay, let me go there. There we go.
Now it is. Yeah.
Okay, so so I'm going to discuss then some of the things that we've learned, both positively and negatively, as as Tom had indicated, and you know, how we've been adapting the program as we move forward. The first thing is that you know, partly because of the necessity of COVID, this you know, started a couple of years ago, right in the midst of COVID. So everything so far has been fully remote, but synchronous. So that means that you know, we're engaging with the students in real time at their university. So that's been positive in terms of the student satisfaction that they've reported. The other advantage of this kind of approach is that we get to choose instructors from wherever. So we have instructors in the program from across Canada, but from other countries as well, Australia, some from Africa. So it allows us to engage instructors from everywhere. And as part of that, we also engage instructors from the country in which we're offering the course. So folks who can offer advice on what is the funding landscape, or how are challenges related to say ethics, research ethics dealt with in certain locations. So those are the advantages. There is, however, the challenge of being remote. Time changes mean that we're often offering the courses at early in the morning where I live, but it's late in the afternoon in Africa. And you know, those folks at the end of a busy day, and so engagement can be an issue. Sometimes they have to deal with how you pick up your children and so on. So those are some personal challenges that we've had to address. There also are issues related to the local research infrastructure. We've had really excellent support from local administration, and we more and more realize that that's absolutely critical. If the local administration doesn't support the program, and not just by indicating that they're in favor of it, but by offering tangible support, such as offering teaching relief to participants, so they have some time to engage in all of this work they're expecting of them. That's really essential. Tom mentioned the fact, or maybe it was Greg, that library resources are an issue. We have to deal with that. And they currently, even those that are quite keen on engaging in research, have very little research funding available to them. And so the advantage here is that the SEER program offers a springboard to get them to get some research funding, demonstrate what they can do. So they've got a track record to go forward with. It's important that the students select projects that can be done within a 12-month period, so that's something that we work with them on to make sure their goals are realistic. But it is often the case that they'll develop projects where they can do some initial work, but if the project is successful, there is the potential to expand that to something that is that has a bigger impact down the road. The biggest challenge we faced here is participant motivation. We all know faculty around the world are busy. We're all juggling multiple things, but in places like sub-Saharan Africa, a lot of the universities have a strong teaching focus. The faculty have big teaching loads compared to what we're used to. Even if they're given a bit of teaching relief to do this program, it's hard for them to really dig out the time to really dedicate to this. So that's been an ongoing challenge that we've faced. The other thing is that those of us who are teaching the course are researchers. We've all done teaching, undergraduate and graduate teaching in our own disciplines, but none of us are educators. We're not from education faculties. So we've actually been, and it's been quite interesting, figuring out how to teach how to do research. Something that we don't even teach in our own universities for the most part. So we've been developing this program, and as we like to say, we're building the ship as we sail it. So we've had to make considerable course modifications between the first and the second offering, and we've just gone through the process that are in the midst of the process of figuring out how to make further modifications for the next iteration of this course. So There is also a challenge related to the technical support for the research groups. And that means finding mentors that can actually work effectively with these students. And we, as Greg mentioned earlier, there are lots of people who want to be engaged, but the diversity of research topics that we're looking at are such that we often don't have in our pool of mentors people with specific expertise. We can mentor them on methods, but we can't always provide the technical expertise. So I'm a metallurgist, and I'm currently mentoring a group that's working on solid waste management, which is not something I have any experience of. So I can only provide them with sort of general advice around research methodologies and not specific advice on the actual research project that they're engaged with. So some of the things that we've been thinking about, one is research capacity and identifying appropriate institutions. So it's important that we identify universities who will benefit most from this program. And I've referred to this as the Goldilocks dilemma. The bowl is too hot, the bowl is too cold, now the bowl is just right. To really benefit the most from what we offer, the universities need to have faculty that have sufficient capacity to benefit from the program, but the best universities in these countries are already more advanced, and they wouldn't benefit from this program nearly as much. So we need to find universities that for which a modest amount of training and mentorship of the kind we can offer would make a substantial difference to their ability to engage and develop the research potential of the faculties. Most of our volunteers, there are exceptions here, of course, but most of our volunteers lack specific knowledge of African institutions to identify appropriate receptors for the program. So there we rely on Greg and his network in Africa, and outreach such as this seminar to help us identify institutions that would most benefit from the program that we're able to offer. And then the third thing here is that institutional commitment is important as an enabler, and faculty buy-in equally so. So identified some of the issues a couple of minutes ago around this. So having things like relief from teaching is essential, but also making sure that the local institution holds the faculty accountable for how they make use of the time that they've been given, so that we actually have real buy-in into the program. We know I guess this may sound self-serving. We believe the content itself is excellent, and it's been well received. That is, the student feedback has been very, very positive about what we're offering in terms of the course itself. But we know that we continue to engage with local scholars who understand the local environment better than some of us, that will help us ensure the relevance and appropriateness of what we're offering. So that's something where we're continuously looking for support, looking for additional guidance from folks around the world. I mentioned engagements being challenging. Part of that is that we have under-resourced faculty that are being pulled in many directions. But it's also the fact that the programs are being offered so far on a completely remote basis. So we are looking for the next iteration of these programs to add an in-person component, to have somebody from the team that goes and spends at least a few weeks at the host institution at the beginning of the project, to make sure that there's some face-to-face engagement to really improve the participation and engagement of the local faculty. And so we need to continue to look for ways of basically developing a hybrid model between local or remote rather and some local participation. So expanding the scope and the reach of SEER over time. So first of all, we're collecting invaluable content from this team that's teaching the course, both teaching and mentoring, that is worth refining and distributing. Oops, excuse me. Well, now I go backwards here. Where did I go? Going too far back. Yeah, so that's worth refining. I mean, we think that what we have developed here is something that could be used more broadly. So certainly within Africa, we want to recruit some of the people that we've trained to serve as instructors, and we're also very interested in getting more instructors from some of the more developed African institutions that can work with us and provide more cultural content. We've thought about, as I mentioned before, we don't offer these programs at our own institutions for the most part. Could we package this up and make it available to engineering faculties? It says here in Canada, but really this refers to anywhere in the developed world. Can we do a better job? Can we actually provide some guidance as to how to do a better job of helping launch our own faculty members? And so that takes us to a global perspective. How do we actually provide learning materials and presentations on a supported website? So these are down the road. This is not what we're going to be doing immediately, but probably the first bullet is where we will focus in the next iteration. So what's next? So the next thing is offering additional courses. And now that COVID is starting to be behind us, we believe, we hope, considering a course delivery that involves a mixture of in-person and remote. And how do we actually go about doing that? What's the most effective way of doing that? We want to investigate means for expanding the capacity. So using more web-based learning that could be done asynchronously. Having some of our graduates take part in assisting us with the provision of these course materials, and perhaps developing an annual conference to build a community amongst the institutions that we've taken this program to. And then finally, getting the word out. So that's part of what we're doing today is to try and indicate to folks around the world that we're working on this, and how do we actually go about expanding what we're able to do and offer it to the right institutions. So we put up here some possible topics for discussion, but of course you're all going to take us wherever you want. But here's some ideas. So the first is, how can you benefit from what we have to offer in terms of a course for new faculty at perhaps some of your institutions. And then the experience and consulting if you develop the course yourselves. How can you strengthen our program? So identifying, again, attractive candidates for these courses, but also identifying teachers and mentoring faculty. And then the latter case is really important. We need a broad range of mentors so that we can cover off all of the many topic areas that the students have want to work on. And then we're always looking for ideas for funding. I'm sure all you folks, you're all deans, you're all looking for your own funding. But if you're happy to share any ideas with us, we would be very welcome to receive them. And then finally, as Tom indicated at the beginning, what is the potential for collaboration between what we're doing and the International Federation and the Global Council of Engineering Deans? So thank you, and
Okay.
any questions?
Thank you so much, Thomas and David, for your outstanding explanation of what's happening out there. Hans, you have your hand up.
I do. It's very, very, very inspiring presentations on all three of you per se. But I just want to introduce you. I'm so happy, given your strategic interest and experience in Africa. A close friend and brother and leader in Africa, Funso Falade, is here. He's the president of the African Engineering Education Association and has his conference now in early October. Funso, if you can hear me, it would be beautiful.
He's there. He's waiting to talk.
Okay. Oh, that's beautiful. Funso, greetings, my friend.
You unmute yourself, Funso. You have to unmute yourself. Funso, you have to unmute yourself. We cannot. There you go.
Good afternoon from Nigeria.
Good afternoon.
Thank you. Hans, good afternoon. I thank David for his incisive presentation, where thank you for the good work that you are doing, especially in the sub-Saharan Africa. And as you are making the presentation, what comes to my mind is, how do we sustain all these efforts? Because yes, you come around to assist to develop capacity. Sustainability is key. Funding. We have so many, most of some faculty members who believe that this engineering education is really not what is necessary. They are looking at discipline-specific programs in engineering, whereas the engineering education enables us to achieve the goals of the engineering specific programs. So we'll be going about with all this creating awareness of the importance of engineering education to the development of engineering specific discipline, the skill in all of this. But then in terms of getting the buy-in and support, it's been really a little bit difficult. And usually, yes, when there are no resources, it's always difficult to put things together. Now, in alignment with what you are saying, from your experience, what are those factors that we need to bring to board to ensure that people actually buy into all of these things? You have traversed over sub-Saharan Africa. Let us look at this so that we can leverage on your strength to develop capacity in this area. Thank you very much. Krishna, I appreciate you.
Thank
And
you,
every member
Funso.
on this particular
Thank you,
program.
Funso.
Thank you.
Yeah. Gentlemen, yeah, any comments, response to Funso? And then move
Yeah,
on
so
to other.
I would, so that's a really good, great comment, and an excellent point that we're constantly addressing. So, I mean, we've only offered this program twice, so our experience is limited. So I don't want to suggest that as a result of what we've done, we have answers. But as Greg indicated at the outset, the whole focus of AWB is a train the trainer model. So what's critical for us is to be able to train young faculty with a clear set of methodologies for how you develop research projects, how you actually do all of the pieces that are involved in that, and provide them with a clear set of tools that they can then go and train younger faculty as they come along. Because we will never have the capacity to be able to offer this program in every university, and to offer it multiple times in a given university. So we need to train the trainer. We have looked at the possibility of offering the course, instead of doing it intensively in one university, offer it in multiple universities at the same time. That's another advantage of having remote learning.
Sure.
To one or two in each university and be able to do it that way. There are logistic issues with that. But we need to find ways of amplifying what we're doing to get the impact that we'd like to see. But train the trainer is always going to be the key element of all of it.
Greg, you had hand up. Unmute yourself, Greg. Yeah.
Yeah, I just want to just briefly react to some of Funso's comments and just to supplement what David's already said, is that, you know, Academics Without Borders cannot, it's not our role, nor would we have much of an impact to try to get the kind of resources that all of our partner universities, most of our partner universities need around the world in low and middle income countries. I mean, they're dramatically under-resourced. Individual members of faculty and I are overwhelmed in most cases, as Tom mentioned. So what we try to do is we try to cast our program so that, as I said before, we meet our partners where they're at, so that, as Tom said, there are no big science projects coming out of this. There are modest projects that meet both the capacity of the individuals, but also the capacity of the resources available, so that they can still achieve something and increase their capacity in a gradual way. You know, I think too often interventions fail because you want to start with something like Mbarara University, which is a relatively new university in Uganda, program's not very old, and get them up to the level of the University of Toronto the next day. And it's not going to happen that way. It's got to be gradual. It's a developmental process. And that's how we try to work.
So yeah, we are running out of time, and so that, Hans, I would recommend that some of us get together, follow up, have a little meeting as to how to take this to train the trainer course that you have obviously developed with some of the best talent in the world. And how can we get that to people who can then take it further in their own countries, in the regions? I think that might be the way to think about it. Like, for example, if somebody FUNSO has a group of people in Nigeria, then take it there. And India, we might have a few people in India who might be interested in doing that. So I think we need a follow-up discussion, Hans, because we're not running out of time today. So Hans, back to you. Yeah.
No, thank you very much, Krishna. You're reading my mind. I agree 100%. I'm so glad that FUNSO was able to join us and this connection, and I can facilitate the emails and all that for you to stay in touch with him. As I said, he's someone that Krishna and I have known for many years and have a close relationship to. At the beginning of the presentation, you also mentioned several countries within Africa, of course, and you were asking the final point, how can IFEES work together with Academics Without Borders? And one of the seed I'd like to plant in my last comment here is we have our global conference now in October in Mexico, and I'm working co-chair with the presidency, with the people there, that brings IFEES, GEDC students, academics, corporate colleagues together and all that per se. But given the location in Latin America, Mexico, I work closely, and there were many leaders, deans and others from Latin America. For example, you have on your list, I remember Brazil and Chile and Peru and Ecuador.
Colombia.
These are relationships that we have very close, and they will be present. So one of the seeds I'll plant, and of course, that has time and financial implications for one of you to consider joining us physically, if at all possible, at Monterrey between the 23rd and 27th of October in that particular city. I just leave that plant, that seed for you to think about. We can follow up, and that could be a concrete way in which certainly I can introduce you, we can introduce you to colleagues in Latin America primarily. There'll be others. Fewer African will be present because of costs of travel, but certainly Latinos will be. So I'm leaving that, and perhaps we can follow up as Krishna thoughtfully suggested, follow up on these ideas.
Yeah, I can be a link to India if there's an interest in working with
of course,
several colleges in India, but that's where I am right now. Yeah. Okay, great. So I think we have run out of time, and so in interest of keeping this going, look forward to further interactions with you folks. And thank you all, Greg and David and Thomas. It's been really exciting. And
thank you very much.
And for everybody who joined us, it's been great. So thank you all. Everybody,
thank you very much.
Stay healthy.
Thank you.
My brother, nice to see you. Missing.
It's exciting.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Bye-bye.
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 Bye.
Bye-bye.